INFJs are known for their loyalty, compassion, and depth of emotional investment in their relationships, because they tend to give so much of themselves to others, whether in friendships, family, or romantic relationships. When they finally decide to burn a bridge, it is rarely a rash or impulsive choice. Instead, it often comes after long periods of inner struggle, reflection, and emotional exhaustion. One of the primary reasons an INFJ might choose to sever ties with someone is repeated emotional betrayal. INFJs are highly intuitive and can often sense when something is off in a relationship. However, they tend to give others the benefit of the doubt, sometimes to their own detriment. They may endure subtle manipulation, emotional neglect, or dishonesty far longer than most people would. But over time, the accumulation of pain chips away at their trust. Once that trust is shattered beyond repair, INFJs may quietly begin to withdraw, detaching emotionally long before the final break is made. Check out our INFJ Mastery course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video. Disrespect for their values can also drive an INFJ to end a relationship. Their values are deeply ingrained and form the core of their identity. If someone continuously undermines or mocks their beliefs, or tries to impose conflicting ideologies in a controlling or dismissive way, the INFJ may reach a breaking point. They need to feel safe being their authentic selves in close relationships, and if that safety is compromised over time, they will eventually walk away, not out of hatred, but out of self-preservation. A lack of emotional reciprocity can be another catalyst. INFJs tend to nurture and support others with an almost self-sacrificing devotion. But when their empathy is taken for granted, when they're always the giver and never the receiver, the imbalance can become unbearable. They often don't voice their dissatisfaction right away. They wait, hoping the other person will notice and care enough to restore balance. But when the silence becomes deafening and the emptiness within the relationship too heavy to ignore, they may cut ties, not with resentment, but with sorrow and finality. Toxicity in any form, be it manipulation, gaslighting, controlling behavior, or consistent negative energy, can lead INFJs to a quiet but permanent exit. They might try for a long time to heal the dynamic, using their emotional insight to understand the other person's wounds and triggers. But when the toxicity begins to erode their mental well-being and inner peace, they come to a clear decision. Their energy and spirit are no longer up for sacrifice. The need for inner harmony, which INFJs hold sacred, becomes more important than holding on to a painful connection. Feeling unappreciated or unseen can also push an INFJ away. Despite their tendency to hide their pain and put others first, INFJs long for someone who sees beyond the surface, someone who values their inner world and efforts. When they feel invisible or taken for granted over and over again, especially by someone they once cherished, the quiet hurt builds into a deep emotional wound. Eventually, they recognize the emotional toll it's taking and walk away, often without warning, leaving the other person bewildered by their sudden disappearance. Another reason INFJs burn bridges is when a relationship consistently feels inauthentic. They crave depth, sincerity, and emotional truth. If a connection becomes performative, shallow, or transactional, they begin to feel suffocated. They may try to inject authenticity into the dynamic, but if their efforts are met with resistance or indifference, they slowly begin to retreat. The INFJ's withdrawal is usually gentle at first, but once they decide the connection is fundamentally misaligned with who they are, they let it go completely. In some cases, INFJs burn bridges not out of anger, but out of growth. As they evolve, their vision of what they want and need changes. If a person from their past no longer aligns with that growth, especially if that person tries to pull them back into old, limiting versions of themselves, the INFJ may decide the only way to fully step into their future is to release the past. Even if there's love or history involved, the INFJ values authenticity more than nostalgia, and they will choose alignment with their higher self over loyalty to a relationship that no longer supports their evolution. INFJs don't burn bridges lightly. It's a decision born from deep emotional processing, from repeated pain, and from a quiet inner knowing that holding on would cost them more than letting go. When they finally close a chapter, it's not for revenge, nor for attention, but to reclaim their peace, their truth, and their soul's integrity. And once the bridge is burned, it's rarely rebuilt, because for the INFJ, it was never about drama or punishment. It was about survival, healing, and protecting what remains sacred within them. When an INFJ burns a bridge, it is often the final act of a long and private internal journey. One of the less visible, yet powerful, reasons they reach this point is emotional depletion. INFJs tend to absorb the emotional energies of others like a sponge. In a relationship where there is constant negativity, drama, or emotional instability, they may spend months or even years trying to be the grounding force, the fixer, the one who brings calm to chaos. But eventually, they begin to feel like they're drowning in someone else's storm, and even their naturally resilient spirit can no longer endure the emotional drain. When this happens, they don't slam the door with fury. They quietly shut it with resolve, finally acknowledging that they can't save someone who doesn't want to be saved, or worse, someone who is pulling them down in the process. Another reason INFJs cut ties is a sense of moral or energetic misalignment. Because they are so values-driven and highly intuitive, they can sense when a relationship is no longer aligned with their path. Even if there hasn't been a specific betrayal or toxic behavior, they can feel when someone's energy begins to conflict with their own. They may stay for a while out of duty, nostalgia, or empathy, but eventually, the dissonance becomes too strong to ignore. It's as if something inside of them whispers, "This is no longer your space." That whisper grows louder with time until the INFJ knows it's time to go, even if they can't fully articulate it to the other person. Emotional dishonesty is also incredibly difficult for an INFJ to tolerate. They thrive on realness, transparency, and vulnerable connection. When someone consistently wears masks, avoids authentic conversations, or keeps the relationship superficial despite the INFJ's attempts to go deeper, it creates a silent fracture. INFJs crave intimacy of the soul, not just company. When they feel they're constantly engaging with a persona instead of a person, they begin to feel hollow. The disconnect gnaws at them until the bond no longer feels meaningful. They don't seek perfection, but they do seek truth. Without it, they eventually walk away, not to punish the other person, but because continuing to pretend would be a betrayal of their own nature. Sometimes, an INFJ burns the bridge because they have outgrown the role they were forced into within the relationship. They are often pegged as the emotional caretaker, the listener, the fixer, or the one who always understands. While this speaks to their strengths, it can also become a form of quiet imprisonment. Over time, they may realize the connection is based on who they've been for that person, not who they truly are or who they are becoming. If someone clings to a version of the INFJ that no longer reflects their truth, the INFJ will eventually choose liberation over continued misrepresentation. Walking away becomes a declaration of their right to evolve. In other cases, the decision is triggered by a deep violation of trust, not necessarily through a single event, but through a pattern of inconsistency, hypocrisy, or emotional unavailability. INFJs don't expect perfection, but they do expect sincerity and consistency. When words don't match actions, or when someone repeatedly invalidates their feelings or gaslights their reality, INFJs slowly begin to detach. They may try to communicate their needs, to find clarity, to give the person a chance to repair the damage. But when the inconsistency persists, they stop asking for understanding and start preparing to leave. Their exit may appear sudden to outsiders, but to the INFJ, it is the final step of a long and painful journey. Check out our INFJ Mastery Course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video. INFJs sometimes burn bridges for the sake of their future. Their idealism and vision-oriented nature makes them deeply reflective about who they want to become and what kind of life they want to live. If a relationship consistently holds them back, clouds their clarity, or keeps them stuck in repetitive emotional cycles, they eventually recognize that their destiny requires letting go. It's not just about the pain of the past. It's about the promise of their future. They may feel guilt, grief, and sadness in doing so, but ultimately, They understand that some bridges must be burned not out of hatred, but because the weight of them is too heavy to carry into the next chapter of their life. When INFJs burn a bridge, it's not an act of cruelty. It's an act of quiet courage. It means they've chosen peace over pleasing, self-respect over sacrifice, and authenticity over attachment. And although they may still carry the memories and the lessons with them, they no longer carry the burden of the bond. They walk forward, not with bitterness, but with the soft and steady strength of someone who finally chose themselves. For the INFJ, burning a bridge is not just about ending a relationship. It is a deeply symbolic act. It represents a final boundary, a sacred line drawn in the sand after countless internal negotiations. The decision to walk away is rarely triggered by one moment, but by the slow erosion of hope, trust, and emotional safety. INFJs often enter relationships with an open heart and the belief that anything broken can be healed with enough love, patience, and understanding. But when they reach the point where no amount of empathy can fix what's fractured, the bridge begins to smolder from the inside long before the flames are visible. One of the most overlooked reasons INFJs burn bridges is the violation of emotional safety. These types are highly sensitive to tone, mood, and unspoken energies. If someone constantly makes them feel like they're walking on eggshells, silences their voice, or mocks their emotional intensity, the INFJ begins to feel psychologically unsafe. Even in the absence of overt abuse, the accumulation of microaggressions, invalidation, or coldness can wear down their spirit. When they feel like they must shrink, mask their feelings, or dilute who they are just to keep the peace, the relationship stops feeling like home. Eventually, they leave not because they hate the other person, but because staying would mean abandoning themselves. Another reason they choose to walk away is when the relationship no longer reflects mutual growth. INFJs are inwardly driven to evolve, to reflect, to understand themselves and the world more deeply over time. If they're in a relationship that stays stagnant, or worse, punishes them for growing, they begin to feel suffocated. They crave depth and meaning in all things, especially in their closest connections. When those connections feel resistant to change, emotionally shallow, or stuck in old patterns that no longer serve them, the INFJ begins to emotionally withdraw. They may try to help the other person grow alongside them, but if the other person resists or criticizes the INFJ's need for inner expansion, that relationship begins to feel more like a cage than a bond. INFJs may also walk away from someone who consistently refuses to take responsibility for their actions. They can be incredibly forgiving, often to their own detriment. But repeated deflection, blame shifting, or refusal to acknowledge hurt causes them to quietly lose respect. If they express hurt and the other person meets them with defensiveness, dismissal, or denial, the INFJ starts to retreat emotionally. Over time, the cumulative effect of being unheard or misunderstood creates a silent canyon between them. And when that canyon becomes too wide to bridge, the INFJ walks away, not with cruelty, but with the quiet, heartbreaking knowledge that emotional accountability simply isn't possible in that connection. There are also times when INFJs burn a bridge not out of hurt, but out of clarity. They may come to realize that their values, goals, or emotional needs are fundamentally incompatible with the other person's. This clarity doesn't always come from conflict. It can come from stillness, introspection, and a growing sense that the relationship no longer fits the life they're trying to build. Even if everything seems fine on the surface, the INFJ's intuitive radar will begin to pick up on deeper misalignments. And when they can no longer deny the quiet feeling that this isn't right for me anymore, they honor that knowing, even if it means walking away from someone they care about. For INFJs, burning a bridge is rarely about retaliation. It's a last act of self-respect. It's the final whisper of someone who gave their best, waited too long, hurt too deeply, and finally decided that healing required distance. Once they make that decision, they walk forward quietly, carrying the lessons, but leaving behind the weight that once held them back. Check out our INFJ Mastery course and INFJ ebook. The links are in the description of this video.